Hi, I'm Phoebe.
Hi, I'm Leah.
I'm Sydney.
I'm Genesis.
And I'm VNA. And this is our study on ethics in studying wild animal behavior. Our research in ecology, conservation, and ethology is vital, but we have to be aware of these studies can negatively impact the animal's welfare. It's crucial to understand that ethical considerations are inseparable from the science itself because wild animals are living creatures that can experience stress, pain, or harm. If we don't properly consider these ethics, the validity of our studies can be compromised. For example, stress, harm, or deprivation can alter an animal's typical behavior and lead to flawed conclusions and inaccurate data. That's why we are so interested in digging into the progression of research ethics and where the field stands today.
When considering current relevant research in this field, we pulled from a major study that is titled The Welfare and Ethics of Research Involving Wild Animals, a primer. This study addresses the ethical complexities of studying wild animals in the wild and in controlled environments, where capture, tagging, release, and environmental manipulation add layers of welfare concerns. The methods in this study included investigating the capture mark recapture method, which is a core method in field ethology. This CMR involves capturing animals, marking them, i.e., tagging them, releasing them, and then recapturing them to monitor behavior, population dynamics, and movement. The study emphasizes that these methods must account for welfare costs like stress or altered behavior due to tagging, and suggests that ethical mitigations, such as using minimally intrusive markings or refined handling techniques, should be implemented. Another example is biologging and animal-borne devices. So ABDs are tools like GPS tags and data loggers that provide valuable behavioral insights. However, since many wild species are poorly understood or not model species, the welfare impacts of these ABDs are often unknown. So this study advocates for evaluating biologging under welfare criteria and leveraging it not just for data collection, but also as a tool to assess and enhance welfare in wild population. In other words, it emphasizes more research needing to be done to assess impacts of these methods in research. Uh, Another example is through handling, anesthesia, sampling, tagging, and transport. So the study reviews how these techniques can cause injury or stress to animals. This is a special consideration when being applied to broad taxonomic ranges, such as insects, crustacean, and mollusks that aren't typically studied. It emphasizes reducing invasiveness and choosing humane endpoints and setting clear ethical frameworks for things like euthanasia when necessary.
When we were researching this topic, we also found some more relevant examples other than that previous study. One of them being the paper entitled Animal Ethics and Behavioral Science, an Overdue Discussion. And in this paper, they talked about how animal behavior research has provided evidence that supports ethical debates, for example, emotions. Behavioral scientists still remain on the sidelines of animal ethics discussions. This gap is due to the divide of science and philosophy, methodology, and fears of regulation by scientists, and all of these limit ethical processes and scientific understanding. The paper also urges for scientists to be more directly involved with animal ethics. And in this paper, they conducted a literature review of animal behavior and ethics literature. They used empirical research findings and analyzed ethical frameworks. And they also drew on historical writings and contemporary debates while also proposing steps for bridging science and ethics. Another example that we found was an international perspective on ethics approval in animal behavior and welfare research. And this paper underlines the need for the review of ethics in animal behavior and welfare research and explains how practices in animal behavior research vary widely across different regions. It also shows that international communication is needed and argues for more transparency in reporting ethics procedures. And in this paper, it was a summary of the ISAE, which is the International Society for Applied Ethology workshop in 2021. And it also drew from existing literature on animal behavior and ethics in the field.
So right now, animal welfare and field research is still underdocumented. Compared to lab studies, researchers rarely report outcomes like injury, stress, or survival after release, and non-target species are often overlooked too. There's existing frameworks like the three R's that are like a starting point, but they're built for labs, not for the complexity of field work. That's why recent studies are calling for expanded models like the nine R's to guide capture, tagging, and ecological interventions. We're also starting to see progress, like ethics boards, funding bodies, and some journals are begging to push for more transparency, though standards still vary like widely across countries. So the key takeaway is that animal welfare and law research needs to be built into every stage of study design and reporting, and expanding frameworks beyond the three R's and recognizing that while animal experience stress and emotions, makes the research more ethical and more scientifically reliable. And sure, like embedding the welfare isn't just about protecting animals. For ethology as a field to remain scientifically rigorous and social responsible, we must treat welfare as an integral part of the research process.
For our future directions, there are some open questions shaping this field. One of the biggest is what alternatives can replace the use of live animals while still giving accurate results? Research are starting to explore things like advanced lab systems or even simulated ecosystems. These kinds of replacements can reduce the need for invasive methods while still allowing us to study behavioral patterns and ecological interactions. Another key question is how can we measure animal welfare beyond just stress hormones or obvious health issues? Current methods often focus on things like hormone levels, injuries, or weight, but animals can show subtle signs through their behavior, problem solving, or social interactions. Developing new ways to measure these would give us a fuller understanding of their well being. Looking ahead, frameworks like the nine R's are becoming increasingly important. Unlike the original three R's, these expanded guidelines are designed specifically for fieldwork, covering issues like capture, tagging, and release. If institutions and funding bodies adopt them, animal welfare would be considered from the very beginning of a project. Finally, new technologies such as AI and computer simulations can help researchers model behavior, predict outcomes, and even design experiments in ways that minimize harm. Altogether, these future directions show a clear shift towards integrating ethics, innovation, and animal welfare in ethological research.
And
Thank
here
you.
are our resources.